Morning. How are you guys? I hope you've had a beautiful start to the day. Now, what are we doing here? We are doing our weekly Q&A inside Better Body Academy. We have a list of questions supplied by our clients, which are a great list of questions this week, I've got to say. And we are going to be answering these calls. And so for a little bit of novelty, I decided to, we're going to broadcast live with this week's Q&A and let everyone see what we kind of get up to inside of Better Body Academy. So if you are coming into this one, guys, live, make sure that you answer in the questions. I'm here and we'll be starting in a couple of minutes, going through a bunch of really cool questions, again, provided by our Better Body Academy members this week. So looking forward to getting stuck into it. What do you got going on for the weekend, guys? Friday morning, is that correct? Yeah, Friday morning in Australia. I hope you're having a beautiful start to the day. Thursday evening or afternoon for us on this side of the world, and it's beautiful and warm at the moment, so it feels like about 20, 25 degrees, and summer's kind of on us for the for the limited time that it is over this side. All right, legends, who we got in here saying hi? Look at all the boys. All the boys are bringing their milkshake to the yard. What's going on, fellas? Good morning, Denny Troutman. How are you, legend? Good to see you in here, brother. Mate, I love you, Dan. I just want you to know, as an ex-mastermind student, bro, you are the OG. I hope you're having a good time there, buddy. Nicky boy, what's going on, mate? Good morning. I hope you are well. Jamie Lennon, what's going on, girl? You've been super, super consistent this week, Jamie. I like it. I like it. I like it. Good morning, Michelle. How are you? Getting ready to go to Bali. I hate you, Michelle. I wish I was going to Bali. That is really, really nice. Congratulations, Michelle. You've got a good life, and no doubt you've worked bloody hard for it, so you deserve it, girl. Have a bintang for me. Terry, how are you, my legend? Good to see you in here this morning. We got Bobby Gordon. Guys, I want you to remind yourself that that Bobby Gordon came into our academy around probably 6 months ago, I'm guessing now. So he won a little Father's Day kind of competition, and then he just decided to carry on his journey, and he's become bloody consistent. So Bobby, mate, I just want to show some appreciation to you. Hey Jimmy, what's going on, mate? Lovely to have you here. Benny Richardson's in here as well. Good morning, Benny. How are you, brother? Toddy's in here. You little legend, Toddy. Good to see you showing up. You're a regular on this Q&A slot, mate, I've noticed. Nikki Friend's in here. We're going to start in 2 minutes, guys, and we are good to go. Follywood, what's going on? One of the consistent girls. Lovely to have your company here this morning, Michelle. Amy Brown's in here as well. Ooh, Jimmy says, I'm going to Bali on Wednesday as well. Well, I hate you as well, Jimmy. You suck. Kenny Beats, what's going on, mate? Good morning, yeah, and good evening to you, Kenny. We've got Nino. Ooh, lovely to have your company here, Nino. I hope you're well, pal. And Sarah Deck as well. All the kings and queens are in here, and I reckon we are about good to start our Q&A for today. So let's get stuck in. I'm going to pop the questions in and display the questions in the comments so you guys can see the answer to these questions. Sorry, rather the questions that's being answered. And let's get stuck in. So is coffee a good pre-workout? Good evening, Mark Hunter. Is coffee a good pre-workout? Yeah, it is. I mean, for me, as you know, inside Better Body Academy, I typically don't like the idea of kind of dependence on supplements. I think that they're really just the cream on top. And what I'm talking about is really 3 or 4 supplements. I really don't think that pre-workout powders are the greatest idea. So I prefer to stick people to, yeah, absolutely, a coffee is a pre-workout. Like, really, when you're taking a pre-workout powder, it's usually a combination of 2 things anyway. It's a combination of some what are called vasodilators, like beta-alanine, which opens up your blood vessels a little bit and gives you a feeling of having a pump. And then the second thing is caffeine. So all you're actually doing is taking a really kind of expensive coffee anyway. So to me, it makes complete sense that having a coffee and something to kind of give you a little bit of extra feeling in your belly, like a protein bar, shout out to my favorite friends at Quest, or something like a banana. You don't want to take something too heavy. So for me, a coffee is a really great pre-workout. I think that's a good idea. All right, so next question up. how come the scale doesn't move? This is an interesting question. How come the scale doesn't move? So perhaps I can read into this question a little bit. So perhaps the question is actually asking, how come the scale doesn't move despite the fact that my photos show that I am seeming to look better? Like, why does that actually happen? Well, there's a couple of reasons to it, but you have to remember that when it comes to your scales, all the scales are weighing is, it's almost like, pretend that rather than having limbs and all these, fuck the scales, kills my life, exactly, Fol. Well, this is an important answer to you, Follywood, by the way. So imagine we took you and you were a piece of human soup and we stuck you in a plastic bag, right, and tied a knot in the top and then stuck you on the scales. Well, that's essentially what you're doing. Your body is a soup of bone and blood and tendons and ligaments and fat and protein, and it's just wrapped in a bag called your skin. And then we slop it on a set of scales, and we start to interpret the meaning of life from the scale, and it kills my life, as Michelle says. Yeah, you're exactly right. So all the scale is actually measuring is your weight relative to gravity. So is it an indicator? Yes, it's an indicator of whether you are making progress, but it's not the only thing. This is why we recommend taking photos and definitely some measurements of your waist and your hip circumference. Because if the weight is staying the same, but the hip circumference and the waist circumference is coming in, as long as you're not breathing in and going, as long as you're not breathing in, you are losing fat. You don't have a waist muscle. If you're shrinking around the waist, it's because you're losing fat. So why doesn't the scale move? Well, there can be a few reasons. The most obvious ones are, given that the scale is made up by more than just fat, it could be that you're just better hydrated. It could be that you've just eaten or drunk. I mean, if you take, let's just take this bottle of water. If this bottle of water is full and it's 2.2 liters, if I take this bottle of water and put it inside this mouth and then jump on a set of scales, I will be 2.2 kilos heavier exactly. Now, a lot of people don't think like that, but that's what's happening. If I hold this bottle of water and step on the scale, I'm 2.2 kilos heavier. So whether the water is inside the bottle or inside your body, that could be the reason why you're not seeing a change to the scales. So it could be that you've just eaten. It could be that you have not been to the toilet yet, so you've got poos and wees building up inside you. It could be that you're better hydrated. Okay, so you're retaining more water in your body parts, not just in your bladder. And it could be that over the long term, maybe you're building some muscle. And this is why it's just really important that you don't use the scale as the single exclusive metric of your progress, because it's one measurement, but it's not the greatest measurement. It has to be looked at over the long term, because I don't know about you guys, but I can go up and down 2 kilos in a day. So if I measure once in the morning and measure in the next scale at midday, then of course the variance is going to be there. So yes, if you've been in Better Body Academy for a while, you know that you have to interpret the scales for more than just the weight itself. Okay, next question. Should I monitor my cardiac rate when working out? Okay, so cardiac, that's just a word that means heart. So should I monitor my heart rate when working out? If you mean working out in the gym while lifting weights, the short answer is no, because you're not in the gym lifting weights trying to increase your heart rate for the most part. You are trying to build some muscle. That's why you're in the gym. So measuring your heart rate to build muscle is kind of like taking your temperature to see how much you weigh. That doesn't really make any sense. Or taking your heart rate to see how tall you are. The two don't match up. You're measuring the wrong thing. When you're in the gym, what you should be measuring is the weights that you're lifting and the reps that you're doing and the sets that you're doing. That's what you should be measuring. So at what point should we measure our cardiac or heart rate? Well, this potentially might be when we are working to improve our cardiovascular system specifically, not for the intention of weight loss, but cardio has a role in improving our actual lungs and heart, get them working better and warding off heart disease, high cholesterol, etc. And so we might want to measure our heart rate to tell us if we are operating at a high enough threshold to train a certain thing. So as an example, there's something called I'm completely losing the word, but essentially it means I've lost the word, but we need to get our heart rate high enough to make sure that we are essentially beating and charging ourselves enough that we're working at a rate which improves our anaerobic threshold. My apologies, I've got the word. So we need to get to the anaerobic threshold over which we know that we're using a certain type of fuel. So that might be an indication for when we might want to use it, or we might want to get an idea of our resting heart rate. So over time, with more exercise, as our cardiovascular system starts to improve, let's just pretend you get on the treadmill and you run at whatever 5 kilometers an hour or 5 miles an hour on the treadmill, number 5, and you look at your heart rate maybe at 15 minutes and your heart rate is beating at 150 beats per minute. And then 3 months later, you take your heart rate again and you find that your heart rate for the same speed and the same incline doing the exact same thing is beating at 130 beats per minute. That would indicate to you that your heart and lungs are performing better than they were because the heart's not having to beat as quickly. So in short, it depends what you're actually trying to do. Okay, so I'm going to come to a live question from Nick Friend, who texted me just now saying, how would you know your ideal weight from a healthy perspective? Is body fat relevant or is BMI a useful tool? Great question. So in short, is BMI a useful tool? Yes, but it can be fraught with issues. Nick, can you please let me know your height in meters, please? So your height in meters. And I'm going to do a quick calculation to be able to try to help you. Now, while I talk about that, while I wait for that to come through, is body fat relevant? Yes, I do think it's relevant. Of course it's relevant because from a healthy perspective, the reason why men die at young ages that are overweight is because this is where the heart and lungs and kidneys and liver are. And if they are being put under a tremendous amount of pressure from body fat, then that's going to squeeze those organs, increasing the blood pressure and causing more likelihood of a cardiac event. So body fat, particularly abdominal fat, and particularly deep abdominal fat called visceral fat that's actually around the organs themselves, that stuff that squeezes your heart, that's a problem. That's absolutely a problem. Now, if you compare that to women, women store their fat typically around their butt and their hips. And because there's nothing that important near our butt and our hips until you go a fair bit deeper, adding layers of fat to the bum and the hips doesn't really do too much. So this is absolutely why men are at higher risk of heart attack than women. And this is typically until they get to the age of about menopause, where women typically catch up. Now, I want you to think about maybe your nan or an older lady that you know. You might find that if you look at her versus a younger woman that's carrying a little bit more weight, you might notice that the fat tends to kind of move up the body, and they will start to get padding out in their breast, in their belly. And this is the reason why at menopause and beyond, the heart rate disease percentage starts to increase to the same level for women as men from about menopause on. And the reason is because obviously the absence of a lot of the female hormones means that the current hormone profile structures the body fat composition a little bit more like a man. And so that's the reason why it rises. Now we're going to go to Nick. So hopefully I can remember this equation. So Nick, what we need to do to calculate your BMI is, what is your weight currently, Nick? Please let me know. Now what I'm doing here is I'm making the calculation around his height. 0.76. Okay, so I've got a number that I'm writing down here. And what is your weight, Nick? If you can let me know that. And I'm going to tell you what your BMI is. I'm going to predict about 84. Am I right, Nick? Come on, brother, give it to me. 79. Wow. Okay, so 79 divided by 3.097 is 25.5. Okay, Nick? Can you see that? 25.5. So you are on the exact end of what is deemed the right weight for your height. So what is typically said is if you are around 18 to 25 BMI, then you are in the right zone and you are 25. The second measurement that I would take if I was you, Nick, to try to give you some feedback would be your waist circumference at your belly button. If you can tell me that, great. What you want to be is, as a man, you want to be under 94 centimeters. 94 centimeters is essentially the cutoff of which it starts to kind of indicate that you're accumulating abdominal fat, and that can become problematic, okay? In terms of, is there a target body fat percentage? No, I don't think so. I think, well, somewhere, 15, 16% is generally considered good, okay? But body fat percentage, I think, is really hard to test, and it's almost impossible to test. The only way you can do it is jump on a set of those scales and it puts some electricity up you and it pretends to calculate something, and it's like so unreliable, it's not funny. So I would pay attention to, I would look similar to weight, I would look at a number of indicators, okay? So your BMI, Nick, is 25.5. Now, to anyone that wants to figure out BMI, here is the way you actually calculate it, okay? See what Nick did here? He's got his height in meters. So he's 176 centimeters, which is 1.76 meters. Okay, 1.76 meters. So what you need to do to calculate your BMI is it's 2 steps. It's pretty simple. You need to do 1.76 times 1.76. So you times your height by the same thing times 2, so squared, okay? You get this number here. Now I've rounded that off to 3.097. So you write that number down on a piece of paper. And then what you do is you take your weight in kilograms, and Nick's is 79 kilograms, and I say 79 kilograms divided by that number that I just wrote down, which is 3.097, and that is 25.5. That's how you calculate your BMI. Now, I'll give you mine. Nick and I are actually the same height, so this makes it perfectly easy. I am about 85 kilograms divided by height squared, which is 3.097. That's my BMI. Okay, so is BMI problematic? BMI can be problematic if you've got a lot of muscle because it would give you an indication that, well, according to this, I'm overweight, and I'm clearly not overweight. So this, remember, is a relationship between weight and height. So weight only takes into account the mass. It doesn't take into account the constituent parts. So is BMI good? I think it's okay to use. Similar to weight, it's saying, okay, cool, I'm going to take that. If you're pairing it up, Nick, with your waist circumference, which is 90 centimeters, then this tells me that you're back at the point where you can consider yourself a healthy guy from a weight perspective. Now, for me, what it's going to say is my BMI is 27.5, so I'm overweight. But if I look at my waist circumference, I'm probably going to be about 85, 86 centimeters. So clearly not carrying overweight. Hopefully that helps. Now, you've said sort of BMI 18, I'd be anorexic. Yeah, the goal is not to get lower. The goal is to kind of be in the range. That's the goal. And you need to be able to interpret it. And this also takes into account, it used to be, just for the record, it used to be kind of considered 20 to 25. But then they, to my knowledge, they extended the lower end slightly, more so for the Indigenous people, because the Indigenous people tend to be slightly leaner than for the white guy, okay? They're naturally leaner. So, in other words, a Indigenous man that is a BMI of 20, your BMI is 25.5, he might actually be considered more overweight or at risk than a white guy of the same weight, because of the fact that the build is typically leaner. Does this make sense? Gosh, guys, I've never given an explanation like that, and I hope I'm not boring the shit out of everyone. But hopefully, if you wanted to ever calculate your BMI, that's the way to do it. You take your height in meters, 1.6. If you're a woman that's 160 centimeters, you say 1.6 times 1.6. You write that down, and then you take your weight in kilograms and divide it by whatever that number is that you wrote down. Okay, let's keep going. Can I work out on an empty stomach, and will I see results? Of course you can. So empty stomach has nothing to do with results. Again, these two things they don't have anything to do with each other. Okay. So people hear about this kind of fasted cardio. It doesn't make a difference. What makes a difference is the amount of calories over the course of a day. So I could go into more detail, but I think it would get boring. You just need to go with the idea that if you're doing fasted cardio, if it feels good and it feels like it's easier to run, to train, to do sit-ups, whatever you are actually doing on an empty stomach, then do it on an empty stomach and eat after it. If it feels like, for example, when you train legs, you feel like you need to have some food in your belly, well then put some food in your belly. It won't impact your results. What will impact your results is if you feel uncomfortable in either no food or lots of food or any food, and then your workouts are hampered as a result of that. So don't think about the science of like chemistry. Think about the behavior that happens, okay? For example, you might ask, will undersleeping make me fat? Well, one of the ways to answer that is that if you feel so tired that you can't do anything, well, that's what's going to make you fat, regardless of what happens to your hormones. So actually, it's the behavioral part that's far more important. Okay, next question. Can I just do cardio and follow nutrition and get results? Yeah. So a lot of these, the challenge with these questions are, the answer is going to be depends on, and in this case, it's depend on what you're trying to actually get. So if the question that you're asking here is get results is I want to lose weight, well then there are better ways to go about it than just doing loads of cardio in terms of a safer way to go about it. So as an example, if you're 150 kilograms and you're listening to this podcast episode and you take this as, yeah, cardio is a good idea, and then you go out and start trying to run as a result, and that just starts to just go like this on your hips, your knees, your ankles, that's not a smart plan. So this is why inside of Better Body Academy, we have our trifecta system of nutrition, steps, and workouts. This is the best way to go about getting fat off. Now, if the question is results in becoming an athlete and running a marathon, well then, can I just do cardio and follow nutrition? Well then, yes, you're going to need to do more cardio to improve yourself as a marathon runner. In the fitness space, this is called the Law of Specificity. The Law of Specificity. If you want to get really good at rugby league, then you should do lots of rugby league. If you want to get really good at tennis, then you should do lots of tennis. You shouldn't do lots of swimming. The two are pretty much unrelated. Okay? Next question. And by the way, I should say, if anyone watching along wants to ask any live questions, then let me know, pop them in the comments and I'll answer the questions live. Is there any such thing as slowing and speeding up of metabolism? Yes, there absolutely is. There absolutely is, but probably not to the effect that you think. So a lot of people think that when they say, oh, my metabolism's slow, that it's like a quarter of another person's. Or that if I've got a fast metabolism, I burn 7 times the calorie that you do. That's just not the case. What typically is the case is the more you weigh, the more calories that you need to burn at just keeping you alive, okay? And whether that be lots of muscle or lots of fat, typically you're going to burn more calories. And that's keeping you alive without exercising is what your metabolism basically is. So, is it a good thing to have a quick metabolism? Well, yes, I would say yes, because it means that you're going to be burning more calories even when you're not doing that much. Inside Better Body Academy, what we refer to this is as building a bigger engine. We need to build a bigger engine so that we can burn more calories and we can get away with more. If we burn more calories at rest, that means we can have a couple of extra beers and it doesn't typically hit us. In the converse or the flip side, what can tend to happen, and this often happens with people that have been on very restrictive diets for long periods of time, particularly yo-yo dieting, is over time, their metabolic rate, which is the rate at which they burn calories, just slows down. They go from having a big Ferrari engine that they had when they were 20 years old to being 40 years old and having like a little whippersnipper mower, right? It's just, you could drive it round all day on the grass and it just doesn't run out of petrol. And the reason generally for that is 2 things. Number 1 is being in the dieting phase for so long. You are losing fat and your body doesn't like it. So what it does is turns down all the dials to stop you from losing more fat. And that's going to make you really sluggish, have a slow metabolism, no sex drive, super stressed, tired, lethargic, and all the things. This is the opposite of what we want to encourage inside Better Body Academy. We want to increase your metabolism over time. That is a hint at why workouts, as in resistance training and building more muscle, which builds a bigger engine, is one of the trifecta. Now, if you're in Better Body Academy and you haven't watched the workshop called the Engine Upgrade, you need to get into the guide section and watch the Engine Upgrade. It is workshop number 4, and it's a really important workshop for you to understand, as it'll get you to the point of which you realize, you know what, I need to do some resistance training. Okay, next question up. We've got 4 to go. Ask any live questions if you're coming into this one, guys. If I get hungry during intermittent fasting, what can I have? Okay, so everyone thinks that intermittent fasting is some type of magic, and it's just not. It's not, okay? You get on YouTube and you see all these guys spruiking intermittent fasting. Let me tell you why intermittent fasting works. If you were used to eating breakfast at 6 or 7 o'clock a.m., and then usually you have dinner at 6 or 7 o'clock p.m., how long is that eating window? That's 12 or 13 hours, call it, right? So inside that eating window, it's like a buffet. You can eat whatever you want inside that eating window, and you'll consume a certain amount of calories in that eating window. Now, if you decide to go and do some intermittent fasting, and you have your first meal at 11 or 12 or 1 o'clock, and you shrink the eating window down from 12 or 13 hours down to 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock to say 6 or 7 o'clock, that's 7 hours. You've substantially reduced the eating window. So the buffet is open, but you have just half the time that you can spend at the buffet. So typically, intermittent fasting can be beneficial because it's just a smaller eating window. That's the only way it works. Okay, and all this kind of junk around, these other, that's the thing. So if you get hungry and you are wanting to do some intermittent fasting because you feel like it's a tool that's practical for you, but then at 10 o'clock you think, oh man, I'd really love a protein shake. What's going to happen? Am I going to break my fast? nothing is going to happen. Like, have it. The only reason that we feel intermittent fasting is a good tool to at least have at your disposal from a dietary perspective is that if you're a very, very busy man or woman and getting up in the morning and having a healthy breakfast stresses you out, well, what if we just said, don't have breakfast? Just have a black coffee and you're good. Or you know what? Just have a normal coffee and you're good. That's it. That's it. That's the only way it works. Okay? So what can you have if you're hungry during intermittent fasting? You can have whatever you want. But you just need to include that in your daily calories. Okay. Is there any exercises you would recommend for lower abs and pelvic floor? Yeah. Okay, so Jamie, I'm going to be really honest with you. This is not my specialty. So let me come back to you maybe in the ignition group a little bit more, either privately or with a bit more research to kind of I know loosely around this stuff. The basics of it are obviously things that squeeze those muscles, okay, and try to put tension back into the muscles. And then of course, things that, bring your hips, your legs up to your chest as an example, or doing some ab-based work on the floor, different core exercises, but I'd prefer to give you a proper answer rather than just answering that one off the cuff, if that's okay with you. Okay, next question. Is there a difference between doing push-ups on your knuckles instead of your hands? I've never had this question before, so this is a good question. In short, you look heaps better. You look pretty cool if you're doing them on your knuckles, right? Is it of any benefit to you? I wouldn't really think so, no. I think we just have a common sense approach to this. So what's the difference? Well, if you were putting your fists into the ground like that, all that's going to happen is that when you go like this, instead, you're spreading the weight and the tension across a higher surface area. So it doesn't feel like it requires as much stability. It looks good. I really don't think it makes a difference, and it probably just hurts your hands a little bit, and that makes it feel like you're a legend. So is there a huge benefit to doing knuckle push-ups? Definitely not. Okay, how beneficial are Gatorades and Powerades? Are they good or are they bad? Actually, Dan makes a good point. So Dan Troutman says in the comments, he says, sometimes better for sore wrists. Yeah, so what he means there is that if you're having wrist pain, and typically the wrist pain, I'll give you an example. If you get a lot of wrist pain from bench pressing or any pushing movements, typically that's because you have a really cocked wrist, right? A cocked wrist. So you're pressing, if I can kind of give you something like this, if you're pressing like that, see how much pressure is on your wrist? And a push-up is pretty much the same. So what you want to be doing, and when you do a push-up, is you want to be pushing through the palms of your hands, not necessarily the fingers, right? So you're pushing more through the part that's got the stability. So what Dan's saying is that if you change the grip to a knuckle push-up like this, all of a sudden the pressure on your wrist is in one plane, not like that. And so that can be a lot better for the wrists, particularly if you're doing close grip push-ups where you're directly under the body. So that's a really good point, Dan. Okay, so next question, and we've got 2 questions to go, that's it. So how beneficial are Gatorades or Powerades? Are they good or bad? Yeah, so I would say for the majority of people that are watching this episode, they are unnecessary. Now, the argument made by people would be around their hydration capacity. The other argument made would be the replacement of, electrolytes, which are a type of salt. However, for the average person who is not athletic competitive, for me, you're just taking in a whole lot of calories that you don't need. If you're in Better Body Academy and you are here to lose weight, and you're taking in a bunch of calories by way of Gatorade or Powerade, and the calories are coming in the way of sugar being put into you to replace the sugar that you're burning in your activity, well, in a way, let's just pretend that you're in a nutritional deficit and you were doing really, really well and you're getting, say, a 500 calorie deficit a day and that was good for your level of weight loss, but then you're forgetting to track the Gatorade or the Powerade. Now, I'd have to check the packet. If anyone knows straight away, happens to have a Gatorade or a Powerade near them, they can tell me. But I would guess that the average bottle of Powerade is probably 200, 250, 300 calories as a guess at least. And so what that basically means is that you're sitting there wondering why you're not losing weight because nutritionally you're in a I thought I'm in a calorie deficit, but actually the Powerade and the Gatorade are actually adding all the calories back in, which is meaning that you're not actually in a calorie deficit. You could be in a calorie surplus if you are a habitual consumer of Gatorade or Powerade and you're not really burning that many calories because you're not doing a whole lot of extra cardio. Does this make sense? So this actually goes to one of our trainings inside Better Body Academy. If you have not watched the Freedom Eating Formula, in the Freedom Eating Formula, which is workshop number 5, if you have not watched the Freedom Eating Formula, we talk about the model that you need to eat by. And one of the golden rules, which we call the Sexy 6, is don't drink your calories. And everyone thinks I'm talking about alcohol. It's not. If you are having liquid forms of calories, the problem is you don't need to chew them. So it's effectively like hard lining calories to your belly, right? Now, in the case of Gatorade or Powerade, I like the taste, but I would always have the diet version, which has no calories. In the same way that I would never drink a full can of Coke. Why would I do that? There's a diet version that contains no calories. I'm always going to have the diet version. Okay? All right, last question. What is the purpose of doing paused anythings? Okay, this is actually a good question. So what the questioner is asking, paused anythings, would be something like doing a paused squat. In other words, you're going into the squat, you are dropping into the squat, and you are holding the squat for maybe a second or two towards the bottom of the squat, and then driving back out. Okay, that would be an example of paused squat. Another example of a paused movement might be a paused bench press, where you come down, you hold it for a couple of seconds, and then you push it back up. So there's two benefits of a paused movement that I can think of. The first one would be what's called an isometric contraction. This is when you just hold a movement for a period of time. So there's a movement that's this movement, there's the movements that's this movement, and if you think of a movement like a plank is almost like a paused bench press, right? Just rather than this way, it's going down. You're just planking, you're holding a position. So this is called an isometric movement. And this is a very good form of training to improve both strength and build muscle. So this is the first reason. The second reason, which I think is probably more important in terms of paused exercises, would be when you pause, you take out the natural momentum or elastic recoil out of the movement. So I want you to think of you're doing a squat, right? So we come into the squat, we lower into the squat, and then we push back out of that squat. It's almost like the muscles of the hamstring and the glutes are stretching as you go down and then pinging back in when you come back up again. Stretching and pinging back in. But all of a sudden, when you hold at the bottom, either a bench press or a squat, you're not getting the momentum or the elastic recoil that comes back with coming straight back out. So the pause makes it a lot more difficult. So if you want to have a trial at this, a simple way to do it is I would suggest knock the weight down substantially, and the next set of squats or bench press that you do, let's say that you've got a schedule of 10 repetitions. In between the lowering phase and the lifting phase, what I want you to do is just pause for 2 or 3 seconds, and it is a hell of a lot harder. And so, good question. Got a couple of viewer questions. Can drinking diet drinks be counted towards hydration? Well, I actually believe, and you know, there probably is a contrary argument to this, but I actually believe that all types of fluid count towards hydration. After all, if you take a Coke, and you remove the sugar and the salts and the minerals from the Coke, you've got water, right? If you take a beer and you remove the carbohydrates, the alcohol, the minerals, the whatever else is in it, what is it called? Barley, whatever it's called. If you remove all those things, you've got water. So it's not that drinks of any kind, if it's liquid, it contains water. That's the fundamental basis of it. In fact, one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is one of the great things about eating fruits and vegetables is, and for that matter, meats, they contain a lot of water. So you actually get a lot of your hydration from food if you're eating a lot of whole foods like fruits, vegetables, and meats. Okay? So can drinking diet drinks count towards hydration? Yes. I would say in the same way that so do full fat Coke. It still counts towards your hydration. It's still bringing fluid into the body. It's just meaning that does the benefit of drinking a Coke and hydrating with Coke with all of the sugar outweigh the benefits of the hydration? Well, no. In that circumstance, no, it's not a good hydration choice because there is this very simple way to get the hydration without all the sugar. So you wouldn't count that. So I think personally, the way I would approach this, Mark, is I have my bottle. I want to drink at least one of these a day. And then if I have some diet drinks, well, I don't even really think about it. Like I just drink them. There's no calories in them, so I drink them. I usually drink, the bubblies. They're like what are they called? Naturally sweetened sodas. So they don't contain any calories. They don't contain any artificial sweeteners. I drink about 3 of them a day. And I do think that they count towards your fluid because they're not diuretics. They're not making me piss more. So they do count. The question is, do they contain a whole lot of sugar as well, which means that that's not a good thing. And in your case, that's not a good thing. So having, a can of Diet Coke a day, I don't think is going to be a particularly good thing, but I wouldn't go around the kind of gym saying, hey guys, I'm hydrating with your Diet Coke. Okay, and last question from Nick. Is there a way to calculate weight maintenance calories with any accuracy, or is it trial and error for the ideal 20? Yeah, okay, so good question, Nick. You can go on the internet and search calorie calculator, and you will get a weight maintenance, a weight gain, and a weight loss calculator. So what they do is they take into account, here's the variables. They say, how much do you weigh? What is your height? What is your age? And how much activity do you do? So there's 4 variables there, and you can imagine just from the 4 variables that I told you, then there's a hell of a lot of, like, someone that weighs 100 kilograms could be a lot of fat or very, very lean with a lot of muscle. Someone that says, yes, I exercise moderately. Well, my version of moderate might be exercising 2 hours a day. Your version of moderate might be getting off the couch. It's just very difficult to predict this. Now, in addition to that, are you in a dieting phase, Nick, or are you in a surplus phase? Because if you're in a dieting phase, then you would expect that, versus if we took 2 Nicks and we took Nick that had just been living a certain way for a period of time, his calories are going to be higher, his maintenance calories are going to be higher than a Nick that has been in a dieting phase for a period of time. Even though Nick might be healthier, he's probably got less maintenance calories because of the fact that he's been in a dieting phase and his body is undergoing what's called metabolic adaptation to try to stop him from losing more weight. This is why you have to do a reverse diet and start to bring your calories back up in a very slow fashion. And we're going to be talking a bit more about this in Elite over the course of the next couple of months. Probably just as a final thing to say around that, Nick, when it comes to, looking at your calories, we can give you a guidance, but the best way to do it is to ask yourself, well, what is my behavior causing in the result? So as an example, you would only really want to know your maintenance calories so that you can do one thing or the other. So you can put on weight, lose more weight, or just stick in the middle, right? So then what you do is you track what you're eating for, say, 2 to 3 weeks, so you'll get a reliable average measurement. And if your weight had done nothing at all for 3 weeks and you'd eaten an average of 2,000 calories a day over that 3 weeks and your weight hadn't moved, then you can suffice to say your maintenance calories is 2,000. But if you was eating 2,000 calories a day and you'd lost 3 to 4 kilos over the course of 3 weeks, then you know that you've been in a calorie deficit because you're losing weight. So therefore, your maintenance calories must be 23, 24, 2,500, or at least above 2,000. So yes, you are definitely, it is trial and error. And this is the reason why when people say, oh, can't you just tell me how many calories to eat now today? People want to like Google search how much calories should I have. The reality is this is why it's just not clear. And what we're better to do is look at what the behavior is showing up in our results. All right, guys, I'm going to love you and leave you there. We've been together for 45 minutes. I hope this has been valuable. That's my aim. To anyone that's watching external to our Facebook groups, either on YouTube or LinkedIn or somewhere else on Facebook, I hope this has been beneficial. I'm here to give you guys value. And if you do want to inquire more about working with us coaches inside the Better Body Academy, shoot me a DM and we'll take it from there. To my lovely, lovely BBA Academy brothers and sisters, I hope you have a beautiful Friday or a great finish to your Thursday. I love and appreciate you, and I'll see you over the weekend. Chat soon.